All eyes are on the midterm elections, and in the Lone Star State, the battle between Senator Ted Cruz and his Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke is in high gear. This week, it was announced that Senator Cruz will be campaigning with Donald Trump Jr. in Wichita Falls next month. The public rally and fundraising event is expected to take place on October 3rd at 3:45 at the MPAC. Now, according to a Quinnipiac University poll released last week, the incumbent Republican holds a 9 percentage point edge over O'Rourke. A series of previous polls showed a much closer race that raised major concerns within the GOP. Last month, we spoke with Beto O'Rourke, and this morning we are joined by Senator Ted Cruz, who just put out this new ad focusing on Beto O'Rourke's viral comments supporting NFL players taking a knee during the national anthem. Senator Cruz, your stance on the issue?
His response, as you noted, went viral. Hollywood celebrities and liberals loved it. He was retweeted by all these Hollywood celebrities. It landed him on the Ellen DeGeneres show. They were thrilled that he was celebrating protesting the national anthems, but that's not Texas. In Texas, we stand for the flag. We put our hand over our heart, or we salute if you're in uniform for the national anthem. We respect our country and our veterans, and of course, everybody has a First Amendment right to speak. But you can do so in a way that isn't disrespectful to the flag or the national anthem, and that it isn't disrespectful to our millions of veterans. And indeed, I'm running a TV ad statewide that takes his comments and just takes exactly what he says and contrast it with something that was said in Wichita Falls, which is Tim Lee, a Texan, who was a Marine who in the Vietnam War, he stepped on a landmine. And he tragically lost both legs. And Tim now lives in North Texas. He's an evangelist. And we did in Wichita Falls a big event honoring our military, honoring our veterans, and Tim introduced me. And Tim said at that event, he said he gave both his legs for our country, and he can't stand for the anthem anymore. But he sure does expect each of us to stand for him. And so our ad is simply contrasting Beto O'Rourke's words with Marine veteran Tim Lee's words that he said in Wichita Falls, and I think the overwhelming majority of Americans agree with Tim Lee on this one.
And speaking of agreeing with you, President Trump agrees with you on that. And speaking of the president, he tweeted recently that he plans to come to the Lone Star State to campaign for you. Now, after a personal, hard-fought presidential election, how would you describe your relationship with the president now?
Our relationship is surprisingly good. I am working very, very closely with the president. My office talks with the White House every week, sometimes every day. It was obviously, as you noted, it was a tough-fought primary in 2016. It was an election unlike any other. But when Election Day happened in November 2016, the whole universe changed. That next week, I got on a plane. I flew to New York City. I went to Trump Tower. I sat down with him. I said, Mr. President, this is an historic opportunity. It is rare. It is incredibly rare to have a Republican president, Republican majorities in both houses of Congress. We can't waste this. And indeed, the 4 priorities that I laid out with him that day, I said, look, I think we need to focus on tax reform, on regulatory reform, on Obamacare, and on judges. And I told him then I want to do everything humanly possible to help lead the fight in the Senate for us to get those accomplished, for us to deliver on our promises. And that's what I've been doing every day since. For the last 2 years, I've spent thousands of hours in the Senate trying to bring Republicans together. We have right now just barely a 51-49 majority. It takes a lot of work to get everyone on the same page, and the substantive result, the policy victories we've seen, have been incredible for Texas. You look at in the state of Texas right now, we are producing today 33% more oil than we were producing in 2016. You look nationally. Nationally, we have the lowest unemployment rate in decades. We have the lowest African American unemployment that has ever been recorded since we began keeping the data. We have the lowest Hispanic unemployment that's ever been recorded since we began keeping the data. And youth unemployment, young people coming out of school, we have the lowest youth unemployment in 52 years. Texas is benefiting from low taxes and low regulations, and I'm working hand in hand with President Trump to pass those major victories for the people of Texas.
But Senator, with all the controversies that surround President Trump and with all those accomplishments you just mentioned, do you find him more of a help or a hindrance when it comes to campaigning, do you think?
Well, the approach I take, the national media just focuses and obsesses on the latest tweet, on the latest comment, on the latest scandal. And my standard rule of thumb as I'm walking down the hallways in the Capitol is if someone comes up and asks me about that, I say, you know what? I don't comment on tweets. I got nothing to say about the random comment of the day. If you want to talk about substance and policy, if you want to talk about tax cuts, if you want to talk about reg reform, if you want to talk about Obamacare, if you want to talk about judges, if you want to talk about rebuilding our military, if you want to talk about foreign policy and national defense, I'm happy to talk about any of that. But there's so many, every day you turn on cable TV and there are talking heads lighting their hair on fire. And my approach has been, ignore the political circus, ignore what everyone's going on and on about. Focus on substance, focus on victories. You know, I've got a job to do, which is represent 28 million Texans, and that is my focus every day. My number one priority is jobs, 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 because that's the number one priority of Texans. And as I travel the state, that sentiment, that approach is what I'm hearing from Texans across the state, that they want me to keep focusing on substance and not get drawn into the insanity and the political circus of the Washington back and forth.
Well, give us a little bit of substance in that case. There's been a lot of talk recently about the blue wave taking place across the country. At a rally recently, you mentioned you want Texas to be just like California. What do you mean?
Well, let me be clear. What I said is that national liberals who are flooding tens of millions of dollars into Texas, they want to turn Texas into California. They want to have the same high taxes, the same high regulations, the same terrible environment for small business. They want to have the same open border policies. You know, if you look at this race in Texas, typically in a general election, a Democrat at least pretends to run to the middle, at least pretends to be a moderate. That's not happening in this race. My opponent, Beto O'Rourke, is running hard left. We already talked about how he's embracing the protest of the national anthem, but he's also supporting higher taxes, bringing back the Obama-era regulations that hammered Texas, that hammered oil and gas and farmers and ranchers and ag. He supports not only Obamacare, but expanding it to full-on socialized medicine, putting the federal government in charge of your health care and your doctor. He brags about how he has an F rating, not a D, not a D minus, an F rating from the NRA. On immigration, his position is truly extreme. He supports sanctuary cities and says he is, quote, open to abolishing ICE, open to abolishing the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. That is truly a reckless position, and he's the only Democratic Senate nominee in the country who has explicitly come out for impeaching Donald Trump. That radical view is why he's the number one Democratic fundraiser in the country, because liberals all over the country, Hollywood liberals, are thrilled with that. But that's not where Texans are. In Texas, we want lower taxes, we want lower regulations, we want more jobs, higher wages. We want to secure the border and keep our country safe. And we want to defend the Constitution and defend the Bill of Rights. I think those are the common sense views that really unite Texans.
Now, there is much more we could obviously talk about today, from healthcare to national security, and I know the folks at home would love to hear more from both of you. Now, this could be accomplished through some debates. What's the update on that?
Yes. Listen, I very much hope we will see debates. Over a month ago, I invited Beto O'Rourke to do 5 debates all over the state. That would have been the most debates that has ever happened at a U.S. Senate race in Texas. And I think we owe that to the voters of Texas. We owe that to discuss our records, our visions. Unfortunately, Beto turned me down. The first debate was supposed to be a few weeks ago in Dallas. It was going to be hosted by the Dallas Morning News and NBC News. And I accepted. I was ready to show up. And Beto skipped it. He refused to show up. Now, I'm hopeful we will eventually see some debates. My team and his team have been negotiating back and forth for weeks. I got to say, Beto seems very, very reluctant to debate. They seem to be dragging their feet. And I think the reason is, right now, every 2 or 3 days we see another glowing profile in the press of Beto O'Rourke. He's running like a Massachusetts liberal. He's running like Elizabeth Warren, and that excites a lot of national reporters. But that's not Texas. And none of these glowing profiles actually talk about his radical record. None of them talk about the fact that he's the most anti-Israel Democratic Senate nominee in the country, that he has a voting record in favor of voting for taxes on oil and gas, on energy, voting for positions that would harm Texas. They don't talk about that radical record. They don't talk about his talking about abolishing ICE. Instead, they just say they think he's got really good hair. Well, look, I think the people of Texas are more interested in substance than fluff pieces, and so I'm hopeful we'll have the debates and really get down to substance. And I'll mention something that is really encouraging. As I've held town halls all over the state of Texas, over and over again, virtually every one, people come up to me afterwards and they say, you know, I'm a Democrat. I've been a Democrat my whole life, and I'm with you. We're seeing that all over the state. There's a national, what's called the walk-away movement. And I think the reason is the National Democratic Party is getting so extreme. With the election of Donald Trump, they're just consumed with anger and hatred for the president. It blinds them to everything else. And in Texas, there are millions of conservative Democrats, of moderate Democrats, who are looking at the National Democratic Party and they don't feel there's a home for them anymore when they see candidates like Beto O'Rourke talking about open borders and impeaching the president. That's no longer a party that many conservative Democrats and moderate Democrats feel comfortable with. And so, from our perspective, I'm welcoming them with open arms, along with independents, along with anyone in Texas who believes in common sense values, freedom, low taxes, low regulations, lots of jobs, and defending our rights.
Well, Senator, we look forward to when those debates happen, if they do, and we thank you again for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Best of luck.
Thank you very much. And anyone watching, if you want to learn more, go to our website. It's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. God bless you.
Thanks, Senator.